Yo, what is up, everyone? This is Bennett from Mana Dorks, continuing our limited set review for Bloomburrow. Today, we are going to be hitting up blue as a color. We're going to go over every creature, spell, instant, enchantment, etc., and give it a grade A through D. Real quick, I'll go ahead and go through the grades for you guys. A is a bomb. A is a card that can literally just win you the game if you get it played. Super strong, basically through all points of the game. A B is a strong card, maybe not necessarily win you the game, but if you see it, you're definitely going to want to take it. A C card is kind of like your average card, right? Maybe good like early game or good late game, but not necessarily good at other points. Kind of just your average card, right? Nothing too crazy. D is a card that you kind of want to avoid if possible. Obviously, like if you're playing, let's say blue-black, right? And you don't have enough cards to fill in, maybe you put a D in your deck, but if possible, you're going to try to not do that. Yeah, so that's kind of our grading scale. If you guys enjoy this video, consider giving us a like and maybe subscribe. We are going to be doing Magic content for the foreseeable future, and we hope you enjoy. All right, let's get into it without any more time wasted. First, we have Azure Beastbinder with 1 generic, 1 blue. It's a 1/3 rat rogue with vigilance. Azure Beastbinder can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or greater. Whenever Azure Beastbinder attacks, up to 1 target artifact, creature, or planeswalker an opponent controls loses all abilities until your next turn. If it's a creature, it also has base power and toughness 2/2 until your next turn. I think that's a pretty good card, honestly. I'll probably give it like a B-, I would say. It's a 1/3, so it's not, gonna win you the game. But if you get it out on curve, right, basically each time you attack with it, as long as they don't have if they have some strong creatures out, you're going to be able to keep this guy alive and potentially nullify their strongest creature each turn. Or maybe not even the strongest creature, right? A creature with a good ability, right? Because it's going to lose all of abilities. So Azure Beastbinder seems like a good card for blue. It's a rare. Probably not going to get many of them, but definitely a good card if you're going to go into blue. On to the next, we have Bellowing Crier. It is a 1 generic, 1 blue, 2/1 Frog Advisor. When Bellowing Crier enters, draw a card, then discard a card. So first off, right, 2 mana, it's a 2/1. So it's a little squishy, maybe not the best stats, but it does allow you to draw a card and discard 1. We haven't seen any cards yet with it, but there is kind of a mechanic in the blue-black where they like to, it's called Threshold, where they like to have a certain number of cards in your graveyard. And then the blue-green is kind of a frog-style deck, and they like to flash creatures out and back in so they can re-trigger their ETB effects. Honestly, Bellowing Crier, like, it's a decent effect, but for a 2/1 for 2 mana, probably like a C or C-, I would say. All right, we will head on to the next one. Calamitous Tide. 4 generic, 2 blue. Sorcery, return up to 2 target creatures to their owner's hand. Draw 2 cards, then discard a card. So honestly, I would probably give this card maybe like a C-. It is a lot of mana to basically draw 1 card. Obviously, right, you do get to draw 2 cards, so you get to choose which cards you have in your hand. It is It does have some bouncing effects, right? And maybe if you're in the frog deck, right, you can bounce a couple cards back to your hand even. But 6 mana just feels like a lot for this card. Probably like a C- in my opinion. All right, we go to Charmed Sleep. It is a 1 generic 2 blue, an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. When Charmed Sleep enters, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So basically, it's a removal for 3 mana. You know, it is 2 blue and 1 generic though, so that does make it a little bit more difficult to play in, you know, a 2-color or maybe even a 3-color deck. I'd probably give it a C or C- as well. On to Daring Wave Rider. It is a 4 generic 2 blue otter wizard for 4/4. When Daring Wave Rider enters, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value 4 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. So it's a 6 mana 4/4, which basically allows you to flashback an instant or sorcery with 4 mana. That's not bad. Probably like a C+. It's a good creature, right? 4/4 is gonna be, if you can get it out, is gonna be pretty decent through most of the game. And it allows you to potentially cast a really strong spell for free for 6 mana. Probably give it a C+. Seems good, but probably more of a late game card to try and win the game. Next card, Dazzling Denial. 1 generic, 1 blue. It's an instant. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. If you control a bird, counter that spell unless its controller pays 4 instead. So it's basically a counter spell. If you are playing white-blue, I know there's a lot of bird synergy. Or even if you're playing, you know, blue-black and you splash some birds in there, blue-green, and, you know, you have a couple birds that you get. Honestly, this card seems pretty strong if you have birds. I'd probably give it a B- if you have birds, but probably like a C if you don't have many birds in your deck. Seems good, though. All right. Next, we have Dire Downdraft. It's a 3 generic 1 blue instant. First off, the spell casts one less to cast if it targets an attacking or tapped creature. Target creature's owner puts it on top or on the bottom of their library. So it's 4 mana to basically bounce a card. But not only do you bounce it, you put it on top of their deck, assuming that their owner wants to keep it. And if the owner doesn't want to keep it, it bounces it forever. I don't know. It seems, I mean, even if it's attacking or it's tapped, it's 3 mana, which is better, right? And I mean, I do think that this set is a little bit more aggro than some other sets. It's probably playable. I would say maybe like a C- for it. 4 mana just seems like a lot for that effect to me. But again, if you can get it for 2 mana or 3 mana, sorry, it's probably okay. Probably a C-, I would say. On to Dour Port Mage, 1 generic, 1 blue. It's a frog wizard, 1/3 stats. Whenever 1 or more other creatures you control leave the battlefield without dying, draw a card. So that seems already pretty good, right? Like I said, a lot of bouncing, a lot of flash play with the frogs. It also has an ability for 1 generic and 1 blue and tap, return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. It seems pretty good. Seems like it'll let you draw cards, into the late game. And then again, there's a lot of like bouncing effects with frogs. So assuming your opponent doesn't get rid of this card early, you should have card advantage basically throughout the entire game, especially if you get a lot of frogs, right? So maybe I would give it like a B if you have frogs in your deck, and then maybe like a C plus if you're playing other creatures that aren't necessarily focused as the frogs are on ETBs. Yeah, seems like a super fun card though. And 1/3 for 2 mana. He's gonna be staying out there, right? He's not gonna die super easily, so that's always good. All right, Eddie Merc Crab. It's a 5 generic 2 blue with flash. Elemental Crab, 5/5 for the stats. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. Eddie Merc Crab enters tapped if it's not your turn. When Eddie Merc Crab enters, tap up to 2 target creatures. So, right, 7 mana, 5/5, but theoretically, if you have a lot of spells in your deck, it could potentially even come in for 2 blue. I think it obviously depends on when or how heavily you're playing spells, right? If you're playing a pretty spell heavy control deck, right, this card seems nuts because you're going to be able to play it for super cheap, and it's kind of like a combat trick, right, where you can play it maybe like whenever, right before they go into the battle step, and tap 2 of their creatures, and then you have it next turn to attack, right? If you're about to attack for lethal damage, right, you could even play it and get 2 of their defending creatures tapped to finish up the game. But if you're not playing spells, this card seems pretty expensive. Obviously 5/5 is strong, but for 7 mana, if you get that in your hand and you're not, at the beginning of the game and you're not playing spells or instants and sorceries, it's going to be a while before it becomes a card that's usable. I would say if you're, blue-red, which is like a very spell-heavy instant sorcery quick casting, it's probably like a B-, and then other decks it's probably like a C. Cool artwork on that card though, for sure. Next we've got Eluge, the Shoreless Sea. It is 1 generic 3 blue, a legendary creature elemental fish. Eluge's power and toughness are equal to the number of islands you control. Whenever Eluge enters or attacks, put a flood counter on target land. It's an island in addition to its other types for as long as it has a flood counter on it. The first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn costs 1 or blue or 1 generic less to cast for each island or each land you have with a flood counter on it. So, this card seems pretty strong to me. Obviously, you have to have 3 islands out to play it, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to play if you're playing multicolors, or even, like I said, 2 or 3 colors. And I feel like this set specifically wants you to play 2 colors. Obviously, you can probably splash a little bit, but I feel like there's some pairs, right? Like blue-white seems like flyers, blue-red is otters, blue-black is rats, blue-green is frogs, right? So obviously I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get this out maybe on turn 4, right? You're probably not going to get it on curve, but when you do get it out, I feel like it's going to be pretty strong. Like it's at least going to be 3/3, and then you can start, at least 3/3, and then you're going to put a flood counter, so at least a 4/4, and then instant and sorcery spells you have are going to cost 1 less for basically the rest of the game. And then every single time you attack, you get to put a flood counter on another target land, and so your spells just keep costing less and less and less. Yeah, I think this is probably in bomb territory. I would say like an A-. I think it's harder to get out on curve, but when you get this card out, if your opponent doesn't deal with it, you basically, this card is just going to ramp and your spells are eventually going to be free, right? Your instants and sorceries. So yeah, seems like a good card. A- for sure. Onto Finch formation, 2 generic, 1 blue, a 2/2 bird scout with offspring 3. Offspring is the mechanic where if you pay the cost, you may create a 1/1 token copy of it. So that would be 6 mana for a 2/2 and a 1/1. Flying, and when this creature enters, target creature you control gains flying into the end of turn. I mean, a 2 generic, 1 blue, 2/2 flyer is probably decent, right? Just base stats. It does give another creature flying, so right, maybe you have a really strong creature and you want to get it in there for lethal damage, or not lethal damage, but even just like a good chunk of damage. I feel like this is one of those cards. It does have offspring, but I don't think you're going to use it for offspring very much. Again, it does have the evasion with flying, but it's probably just, you're probably just going to use it as a 2/2 most often, and not, obviously if you can use the ability you will use it, but it's not going to win you the game a lot of the time. It's probably just like an average card, probably just like a C. Yeah, so we will go to Gossip's Talent, which is a 1 generic, 1 blue. Enchantment, it's class. We brought the classes back. So the first level, whenever a creature you control enters, you get to surveil 1. Then you can pay 1 generic and 1 blue as a sorcery, basically. And whenever you attack, target attacking creature with power 3 or less can't be blocked this turn. Then to advance it to level 3, you can pay 3 generic and 1 blue. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may exile it and then return it to battlefield under its owner's control. So I think a lot of the times with talents, especially in like a limited format, you're probably not going to get to the end, to level 3 very often. You might make it to level 2 depending on how cheap it is. I do think the first level of this ability is pretty good. You get to kind of level out your draws with it, right? And again, there is the rats in blue do like to have cards in their graveyard, so they can activate their threshold effects. And then the second level, again, whenever you attack, target attacking creature with power 3 or less can't be blocked this turn. That's probably pretty decent. Again, it's I think the first level is probably just stronger in general. But I think if you pay 2 mana for being able to surveil every single time a creature enters, that's gonna feel okay. It's probably like a C+. You know, not the best card, but if you get it in your deck, it'll be nice to make sure you don't get landlocked or are just drawing a bunch of cards you don't need. All right, next card, Into the Flood Maw for just 1 blue. It's an instant card. First, you can choose to gift a tap fish, and so there's a new mechanic called gift. Basically, whenever you cast the spell, if you promise the gift before the spell resolves or before the spell starts, you get a stronger effect. So in this instance, If you gift a tapped fish, they get a 1/1 fish creature token that's tapped. So the spell effects are return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. If the gift was promised, instead return target non-land permanent to an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So it's a creature or a non-land back to its owner's hand. Honestly, for 1 blue, this seems pretty good. Again, right, you're giving a fish if you want to return, like an enchantment or an artifact, right? But a 1/1 fish isn't the end of the world, right? Like, yeah, it's one more blocker and maybe extends the game a little bit longer. But if you're playing this card, you're probably playing a little bit more control anyway. Honestly, and it's a very cheap card, right? So I think if you see this card and get a couple of them or 2 or 3 of them, you just kind of feel good about it, right? It's not gonna win you in the game, but it definitely is good. I would probably just give it a flat B. A lot of the gifts are gift cards, and again, you don't want to give your opponent card advantage, but this one you're just giving it a 1/1 creature that's already tapped, right? So maybe you just need to get a creature out of the way so you can do lethal damage, and in that case you wouldn't even have to gift a fish. You could just cast it for its base level and be fine. Or if it has, if they have a really strong enchantment, or maybe even a class that's fully leveled up, right, you can gift the tap fish. Then they have to take their class back up and then start from scratch. Yeah, I think I'm gonna give it a B. All right, on to Kidnap, which is 2 generic and 2 blue. It is an enchantment aura. You can gift a card, which means they get to draw a card before the spell takes effect. Enchant creature. When Kidnap enters, tap enchanted creature. If the gift wasn't promised, put 3 stun counters on it. You control enchanted creature. Oh man, this seems pretty strong. Obviously you never want to gift the card, but if your opponent has a bomb that they just played, right, and you have this in your hand, you can just get their creature. Yes, it's tapped, right? So you have to wait until your next turn to actually use it. But even if you put 3 stun counters on it and you don't gift the card, it's basically just removal, right? It just gets rid of that creature out of your opponent's creature defending pile, right? Dude, this card is really strong. Honestly, this card is probably an A. Yeah, this is probably the first A for blue for me. Yeah, it has to be such a strong card. Definitely hope I pull that one if I'm playing blue in sealed. All right, next card, Kitsa Otterball Elite, a 1 generic 1 blue. It's a 1/3 Otter Wizard with Vigilance and Prowess. You can tap the creature to draw a card and then discard a card. And then you can pay 2 and tap to copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Activate only if Kitsa's power is 3 or greater. So, and again, that kind of combos with the prowess, right? Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, or in general just a non-creature spell, so even an enchantment, right? Kitsa gets +1/+1. I don't necessarily think that last ability is going to see play all that much, right? Because theoretically, it's on your second spell you can potentially copy it and choose a new target for it, right? So potentially, right, like let's say it's Kidnap and you want to copy that with Kitsa. You're going to have to play another spell first. Or another non-creature spell first, and then play Kidnap. So it's gonna have to be late game before that even comes into play. But being able to draw a card and then discard a card is always good just for tapping it. And if you do, again, have a lot of spells in your deck, you get prowess, and this creature has vigilance. Right, if you maybe cast a couple spells during your turn, you are all of a sudden attacking with a 3/5, which is a really strong creature for 2 mana. I mean, even if you have if you just cast one non-creature spell, it's a 2/4. You're probably going to be able to attack, and it's probably going to win more trades than it loses. So Kitsa seems really strong. I really like the otters. The otters in this set. Maybe not so much unlimited, but they just look super cool to play. Kitsa's probably going to be an A-, probably not a full A, but it is really strong basically the entire game. And with the copy target instant or sorcery spell and give it a new target, you could potentially just win the game with that and the right spell, like I said, with Kidnap or with another spell. Yeah, I think A- is right for Kitsa. All right, on to Night Fisher for 3 generic and 2 blue. It is a 4/5 bird knight with flying. And then whenever another non-token bird you control enters, create a 1/1 blue fish creature token. So yeah, this card seems pretty good. Honestly, probably like a B or a B+. Again, it's a kind of a late game card, but if you're playing birds, it's probably like a B+, and if you're playing any other creatures in blue, it's probably like a B-. Right, you're gonna get creature advantage whenever you cast birds, but a lot of times you're gonna have this card out later and maybe not have as many birds in your hand, so you're not gonna get as many blue fish tokens. So if you're playing a strictly bird deck, probably a B+. But if you're playing other creatures than birds, probably like a B- or C+ maybe. All right, on to Lightshell Duo. This is a 3 generic, 1 blue, 3/4 rat otter with prowess. Each color has, I believe, 2 of these types of cards, where they're meant for like rats are the blue-black and otters are the blue-red, so theoretically you could play this in both of those decks. And prowess is the otter skill, and then threshold, which is having a certain amount of cards in your graveyard, is the blue-black skill or blue-black effect, right? And so it kind of hits on both of those, right? So it has prowess, and then when Lightshell Duo enters, you get to surveil 2, so you can potentially put more cards in your graveyard. It is a 3/4 for 4 mana. It is pretty flexible, right? I don't think it is like a crazy strong card, but it is probably a pretty decent card, and you're probably happy to see it in your deck. Probably like a C, maybe C+ because it's so flexible. All right, Long River Lurker is 2 generic, 1 blue, a 2/3 frog scout with ward 1. And then other frogs you control have ward 1. When Long River Lurker enters, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. Whenever that creature deals combat damage this turn, you may exile it. If you do, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So, first off, 2/3 for 3 total mana is okay. It's probably not great, right? You'd rather see like a 3/3. It does give frogs ward, right? So it makes them harder to target with spells, makes other spells more expensive to remove them or tap them or whatever. And then it also basically allows you to re-trigger an ETB effect for a frog you have. So probably, I just feel like this card's like a C-. It's decent, but it's probably going to be more filler than it is like actually exciting to play it. All right, Long River's Pool is just 2 blue. You can gift a card, so they get to draw a card before its effects take place. Counter target creature spell, and if the gift was promised, instead counter target spell. I feel like this card is going to be good in some formats, like really good in some formats, but I don't think limited is one of them. It is a counter spell if they get to draw a card, and you can counter anything. But it is 2 blue, so again, that is going to be tough if you're playing 2 colors, especially if it's early game, right? But it could potentially save you in a pinch, right? If you're about to lose the game because of a spell they cast, you can gift them a card and counter the spell. Probably like a C+ in limited, I would say. But I think this card is going to be strong in some other format, so maybe not upset if you pull it, but it might not get played if depending on what kind of deck you're going. All right, Mind Spiral. 4 generic, 1 blue sorcery. You can gift a tap fish. Target player draws 3 cards, and if the gift was promised, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. So again, you're probably going to be targeting yourself to draw 3 cards. And potentially, you can remove a creature for 2 of your turns. Maybe a blocking creature or a creature with a strong attacking effect, right? As just a common card, it seems pretty decent, but it is pretty expensive, right? It's not going to win you the game. It may continue, like if you're behind, it may help. But if you're winning, there's probably just better stuff to play at 5 mana. It'll probably make it into your deck if you're playing some sort of blue, though. So maybe like a C or C- for Mind Spiral. Art on that card is super sick for sure. All right, we've got Mind Spring. So for X generic and 2 blue, you get to draw X cards. It is a rare. That is probably pretty good if you are behind or even, right? It creates some card advantage for you. Even if like X is 1, you probably want X to be like 2 or 3, right? So it's probably going to be a late game card. Probably like a C+ or a B- for Mind Spring. Definitely a good card, but I don't know in limited, and especially like I said in Bloomburrow, I think this is gonna be a really aggressive set, and so I think this card might be tough to get the full value out of in limited in this set. All right, on to Mind Whisker, which is 2 generic and 1 blue. A 3/2 rat wizard. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get to surveil 1, and then Threshold, as long as 7 or more cards are in your graveyard, creatures your opponent controls get -1, -0. So 3/2 first off for 3 mana. Again, not the best, but he kind of helps with Threshold. Little rat guy helps with Threshold by surveilling, allows you to draw the cards you want and put the cards you don't want into your graveyard. The Threshold effect is good, but again, you have to have at least 7 cards in your graveyard, and so that's going to take a while. Probably just a C for Mind Whisker. Fun card, but I think it might take a little too long to get that the Threshold mechanic going. All right, we got Mockingbird for X blue. Flying, you may have Mockingbird enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield with mana value less than or equal to the amount of mana spent to cast Mockingbird, except it's a bird in addition to its other types and has flying. Oh man, I think this card is really strong. It's probably an A, honestly. I think this card is just too good to not put in your deck, right? If you're behind, right, you can make it the strongest creature that your opponent controls. If you're ahead, right, you can potentially copy like a good creature with a good effect, right? And it has flying, so it has some evasion as well in there. Yeah, this card seems nuts. I think if you get it, you have to try and play it if possible. Really strong card. All right, Night Whirl Hermit, 2 generic and 1 blue. It's a 1/4 with vigilance. And it has threshold. As long as 7 or more cards are in your graveyard, Night Whirl Hermit gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked. Again, it's the threshold. Rats, right? They seem interesting, but I think threshold as a mechanic, I think is going to be too slow and limited to really pop off. Obviously, right, if you have the right cards and you get all rats, maybe it can work. But I just think probably like a C-. I think this card is, 2/4 for 3 mana with vigilance is good, but you have to have 7 cards in your graveyard. Probably like a C-, yeah. All right. Otterball Antics. For 1 generic, 1 blue, you get to create a 1/1 blue-red otter creature token with prowess. And if this spell was cast anywhere other than your hand, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. It also has flashback for 3 generic and a blue, so you can cast it from your graveyard after you cast it, or if maybe you thresholded it, right, or surveilled it and got it into your graveyard, but then that would exile it. If you're playing otters and you're playing a lot of spells, this card seems fun. A lot of sorceries, instants, etc. Right, for 2 blue, you get to create a 1/1 otter with prowess. But again, you need to be maximizing your instants and sorceries that you want to play so you can actually get value out of that otter, right? A 1/1 otter is not great on its own, but it does have prowess, and potentially you can cast it again at a later time and get another one, and then that would trigger the prowess of the otter. Probably a C-. This card, if you have a lot of otters, could probably be fun and usable, but I just don't think it gives you enough value for 2 mana to start the game. Pearl of Wisdom is 2 generic, 1 blue. This spell costs 1 less to cast if you control an otter. Draw 2 cards. This is probably like a C+. Again, if you control otters, right, you get to draw 2 cards for 2 mana. That's a really good value. And even 2 cards for 3 mana is pretty decent. So I would say if you can get it for the 1 less, it's a really good card, but you may not have enough otters to play it, depending on how lucky you are and what cards you get. So probably give it a C+. Plume Escort is a 1 generic blue, 1 blue bird scout with flash and flying, 2/1. And then whenever Plume Escort enters, target creature you control gains hexproof until the end of turn. This card is pretty strong. It is not a bomb per se, but you can use it as a combat trick, right? You can use it as basically you can save a creature with it if you save 2 mana, right? It doesn't counter the spell, but it allows whatever spell that's targeting your creature to fizzle. And it is a 2/1 flyer, so again, it is squishy, but for 2 mana, right, and potentially doing 2 damage if they don't have reach or another flyer in their deck. This card seems pretty good. Probably a B+. Probably a B+ for Plume Escort. All right, we go to Portent of Calamity. It is X generic and 1 blue sorcery. Reveal the top X cards of your library. For each card type, you may exile a card of that type from among them. Put the rest into your graveyard. You may cast a spell from among the exiled cards without paying its mana cost. If you exiled 4 or more cards this way, then put the rest of the exiled cards in your hand. Again, this card feels like maybe a strong card for a lot of game modes, but maybe not limited. The chances that you get 4 different types of cards or more seems unlikely, because you're probably gonna have to pay, especially if you only pay 4 mana and you only get to draw 4 cards, right? If you get 2 creatures, right, it immediately doesn't allow you to cast one without paying its mana cost. It's a rare, but I just don't think that this card is going to be good enough in the limited to I mean, it draws you cards, but you really want it to be able to play without, or play a card without using its mana cost. Probably a C minus, I would say. All right, Runaway Together is 1 generic, 1 blue. Choose target creatures controlled by different players. Return those creatures to their owner's hands. Probably decent, right? You have to bounce one of your creatures, but you get to bounce one of their creatures, right? Theoretically, if you're behind, right, you could bounce their really strong creature, and you could bounce a weaker creature that you have. Probably like a C minus for Runaway Together. If you have a good ETB effects, maybe with like some frogs, it could be stronger than that, because then it'd allow you to cast your frogs again. But it really depends on that, I would say. Probably C minus, yeah. All right, on to the blue season card, Season of Weaving, for 4 generic and 2 blue mana. You get to choose up to 5 pause worth of modes, so it's a modal spell. You may choose the same mode more than once, right? First pause is draw a card. Second 2 pause is choose an artifact or creature you control, and then create a token that's a copy of it. And then 3, you return each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand. This card just seems nuts. It's an A. Right, you could use the 2 pause and then use the 3 pause, right, and create, maybe you have another, like a bomb creature, and then you can create a token of that creature and then return all of the non-tokens and non-land cards. So that means you get to keep the token of that bomb creature while everything else gets returned. If they have a lot of tokens, right, you probably don't want to use the 3 pause, but right, if you can still draw cards with it, which is major card advantage. Or even if you have a good artifact, right, maybe you can just copy that as well and create a token of that. It seems really good, right? If you're playing this late game, it could just win you the game, depending on what you have on the board and what they have on the board. It's got to be an A. All right, Shoreline Looter. 1 generic, 1 blue, a Rat Rogue 1/1. It can't be blocked. And then whenever Shoreline Looter, it has a threshold ability, deals combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card and then discard a card unless 7 or more cards are in your graveyard. So basically, no matter what, when you deal damage, you get to draw a card and discard a card. But then when you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you no longer have to discard said card. So for 2 mana, it's a 1/1, but you basically get to deal 1 point of combat damage each turn with it. And then it also helps you reach threshold. And then again, allows kind of like that card filtering where you can draw a card and discard something that you might not necessarily need. Out of the rats, I think I might rather have Shoreline Looter than about any of them so far. Probably like a C+. It's not going to do much for you on defense, but again, allowing you to smooth like your card draw is very nice. And then if you do have a lot of rats and you're playing threshold, like it'll help you get there a lot quicker. Probably C+. All right, Shore Up for 1 blue. It's an instant. Target creature you control gains +1/+1 and gains hexproof until the end of turn, and you untap it. So combat trick here for 1 blue. It gets +1/+1 and hexproof, so you can save your creature from a targeted spell, and potentially, right, you can then untap it and use it as defense if it's their turn, or maybe it has a tap ability, right, and then you can tap it again and use that same ability. This seems pretty good. Hexproof is always great, and for 1 mana, right, gaining hexproof and then also getting a +1/+1, it's probably a B. Seems like a fun card to play and potentially saves your best creature, right? All right, Sky Skipper Duo. Here's the other blue combo card. It's a 4 generic, 1 blue, bird frog, flying. And then when Sky Skipper Duo enters, you exile up to 1 other card creature you control, and then you return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So you could potentially play it. You would phase out a card, maybe like for lethal damage, right? But 5 mana for a 3/3. I mean, it is a flyer, so that's probably better than just like a regular 3/3. But I feel like there's a lot of like 5 mana cards that are just better than this. Again, it could probably help you get in there for lethal. Probably a C-. I don't think it's bad enough. Because it has flying, it's probably not bad enough to be a D, but. And I guess you could trigger the a frog effect. I don't know. I still think that this card probably barely, if it makes an angel deck, it's just barely. It's probably C-. All right, Spell Gear Gyre, Spell Gear, I'm guessing. 2 generic, 2 blue. It's an instant. You get to choose one, counter target spell or surveil 2, then draw 2 cards. For 4 mana, countering target spell is not great. And then for 4 mana, drawing 2 cards, like there's literally a card in blue that you can do that for 3. I guess you do get to surveil 2, so you get to kind of like decide a little bit what those cards are. But and I guess you can use it depending on, what is happening, and it is at instant speed, right? So you can draw 2 cards maybe at the end of your opponent's turn and then untap your mana and go from there. I don't think this card is very great, though. It is, flexible, but I don't know. This card's probably a D for me. I don't think I want to play this card. All right, Splash Slasher is a 3 generic, 1 blue, a frog wizard, 3/3 stats, offspring with 1 generic and 1 blue. When this creature enters, tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. This card seems pretty good. So theoretically, you can offspring it and tap 2 creatures and put a stun counter on each of the creatures for 6 mana, 2 blue out of the 6, and you'd get a 3/3 and a 1/1. I like this card. I like Splash Slasher a lot. That card seems fun. It seems good. It seems like a good way to end the game, or a good way to stall the game if you're behind. Probably a B+. B, maybe. Probably a B+. I'd say B+. I would be very happy to get this card if I was playing blue. Splash Portal is a 1 blue sorcery. You get to exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. If that creature is a bird, frog, otter, or rat, draw a card. Thing to know, blue cards are all bird. If it's a creature, right? They're all bird, frogs, otters, and rats. So basically you get to exile a card, and then instantly return it, and then draw a card. So you basically get to draw a card, and then if it has a good ETB effect, right, maybe like Splash Slasher, right, you then get to re-trigger its ETB effect and then draw a card. This card seems pretty good, right? 1 mana to draw a card is always decent, and then potentially getting to recast an ETB effect for just 1 mana and drawing a card on top of that, right? If at its ceiling is a really strong card, and at its floor you just get to draw a card. Probably like a B-. Those 2 fun cards in a row for sure. All right, Storm Chaser's Talent, 1 blue, class enchantment. When Storm Chaser's Talent enters, you get to create a 1/1 blue and red otter with prowess. It's a token. Then you can pay 3 generic and 1 blue, and then you get to return target instant sorcery or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Then to reach level 5, you have to pay 5 generic and 1 blue, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get to create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. So I think just as a 1 blue, the level 1 effect is pretty good, right? You just get to create a 1/1 otter creature with prowess for 1 mana. Sign me up, right? And then it does have some potential late game with, again, those are some expensive level ups, right, to get to level 2 and level 3. But if the game does end up going long enough that you can reach those are some strong effects, right? You could potentially, if you have like a bomb instant or sorcery, you could return that, or a very situational something, right? Like if they have, like if you have kidnap in your graveyard, you could pay 4 mana to get that back. That's really strong. And then, you know, even later in the game, right? Again, it is 6 mana, so that's very expensive and limited. But then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you're creating a 1/1 blue and red otter that has prowess, which means you get to, as you cast more spells, your board is going to flood with strong creatures. I don't think it's a bomb, but I do think it is value. I would probably give it a B for Storm Chaser's talent. That card seems super fun. All right, Sugarcoat for 2 generic and 1 blue. It's an enchantment aura. It has flash, so you can cast it whenever. That's always good. You get to enchant creature or food, and then enchanted permanent is a colorless food artifact with, you know, it's a food artifact and loses all other card types and abilities. So it's removal, but they potentially get to gain 3 life from it. This card seems pretty good. Probably like C+. A 3 mana, maybe like a B- because it is flash. 3 mana removal is pretty good. Yes, they do get to gain 3 life, but they have to pay 2 mana for it. Probably a B-. Sugarcoat. Art's great for that card. All right, Thieving Otter for 2 generic and 1 blue is an otter, just a generic otter for 2/2. Whenever Thieving Otter deals damage to an opponent, you get to draw a card. So 2/2 is not going to be as easy to deal damage, especially for 3 mana. Maybe if you get the other talent that wasn't Storm Chasers, the Gossip's talent, maybe that pairs well with that. But other than that pair, this card doesn't seem very strong to me. This is probably a D card. I'm probably not going to put that in my deck unless I have something very specific. Maybe that like a bird that allows this creature to get flying, or I have Gossip's talent and can make him unblockable. So D with maybe like some potential to be like a C- or a C, but I mean, that's a very specific combo, and limited, that's not going to be pulled off very often. All right, Thought Shucker for 1 generic and 1 blue. It's a 1/3 rat rogue with Threshold. You can then, once you have 7 cards in your graveyard, you can pay 1 and 1 blue to put a 1/1 counter on Thought Shucker and draw a card. And you can only activate it once. I didn't see that. I was going to say, if you can activate that as many times as you can, that card seems really strong for a common, but the fact that you can only activate it once, I mean, for one generic and 1 blue, a 2/4 is pretty strong by itself, right? But you do have to pay that mana and have 7 cards in your graveyard, so it's theoretically a 4-cost 2/4, and only if you have 7 cards in your graveyard. So I don't think that card's going to be very easy to play or very good for 4 mana. That's probably a D. All right, Thundertrap Trainer for 1 generic and 1 blue. It's a 1/2 Otter Wizard with Offspring 4. So again, you can pay 4 mana when this card enters as well, and you get a 1/1 copy of it. Then when this creature enters, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-creature card, a non-creature or non-land card from among them, and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So theoretically, right, you can get a 1/2 and a 1/1 for 6 mana. And And then you get to do this twice, right? So you draw 4 cards, and you get to put a sorcery, instant, enchantment, class card in your hand. Then you get to do it again. I don't see this card being all that great in this set for limited. Probably like a C-. Yeah, probably a C- for Thunder Trap Trainer. All right, we'll go to Valley Floodcaller. So this is a 2 generic 1 blue for 2/2 Otter Wizard, flash, and then you may cast non-creature spells as though they had flash. And then whenever you cast a non-creature spell, birds, frogs, otters, and rats, which are all the blue creature types, you control get +1/+1 until the end of turn and untap them. This card seems really good. I don't know. It's probably an A. I was going to say, I don't know if it just outright can win you the game, but I think it can. Especially if you're playing a lot of... It's probably if you have a lot of like non-creature spells in your deck. Or like a good amount. Especially like cheap non-creature spells. And especially if you have like Prowess Otters, right? Because then you cast a non-creature spell. Prowess Otter gets +1/+1 and then also gets +1/+1 from Valley Floodcaller. That could be a nasty, nasty combo. Playing Otters with Valley Floodcaller. So I would say maybe an A situationally if you're playing Otters specifically, and then probably like a B+ other than that. A really strong, really fun card. This card is going to be nuts in a lot of game modes for Magic, I believe. All right, on to Waterspout Warden. We're on our second class card. 2 generic, 1 blue. It is a 3/2 Frog Soldier, and then whenever Waterspout Warden attacks, if another creature enters the battlefield under your controller's turn, Waterspout Warden gains flying until the end of turn. So if you have a good amount of creatures in your deck, right, and you should be getting a creature in the battlefield hopefully every single turn, so it should have flying, and a 3/2 3-mana flyer is pretty good, honestly. Like, it's a common, but C+, I'd be more than happy to have this card in my deck, I think. Then the last but not least of the blue cards in Bloomburrow is Wishing Well. For 3 generic and 1 blue, it is an artifact, rare artifact. So you can tap it to put a coin counter on Wishing Well, and when you do, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value equal to the number of coin counters on Wishing Well from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead, activate only as a sorcery. I feel like this card has potential, but it's very specific. Right? Like, you don't want a bunch of like instants that are like counter spells in your graveyard. You want a lot of like maybe like Sugarcoat or like Splash Portal, right? If you get like 2 or 3 Splash Portals where you can draw a card, or maybe Shore Up, right? Shore Up would probably be a great card to mix and match with Wishing Well if you had like 4 Shore Ups. So you could get a +1/+1 and gain hexproof, and then potentially trigger all your Prowess Otters, right? I think in a Prowess Otter, deck, if you get a lot of Otters, it's probably like a B-, but in all the other blues, like Threshold with rats is probably not very good. With frogs, it's probably okay. It's probably just like a C card. So yeah, I would probably give blue a C or a C+ grade. There are definitely some good cards in blue, but overall, when you're looking at other colors compared to blue, it's probably one of the weaker colors. I wouldn't say the weakest, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And again, if you like this video, consider giving us a like and subscribing. We appreciate you taking your time and watching us today, and hope this helps you win some limited drafts and maybe some sealed events in the future. We will see you on the next one, guys. Have a good one. Peace.